It's hard to even count how many arcade classics came out during the 80s and 90s. But I think most of us also remember a few lesser-known arcade machines we randomly stumbled across and ended up loving anyway. After all, arcade games were a completely different world compared to console games. Console libraries were easier to document, preserve, and organize. Arcades, on the other hand, constantly changed depending on where you lived and how successful the arcade was. The more popular the place became, the faster machines came and went. So here are my picks for 5 obscure arcade games you may remember, or maybe never even saw in the first place. Hook probably can't compete with bigger arcade classics from the early 90s like Final Fight or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it does have really colorful visuals, and more importantly, an amazing soundtrack inspired by the music of John Williams. On top of that, the grotesque bosses really add to the atmosphere. The one I remember the most is that weird chef boss from the first stage. As for the gameplay itself, the controls can feel a little too heavy at times, and the characters never really build momentum properly. Outside of a few basic combos like jumping attacks and simple punch strings, you're mostly just mashing buttons. Another problem that shows up in a lot of beat-em-ups is character balance. Everybody uses melee attacks, but characters like Pockets almost feel broken in a bad way. I swear something is wrong with his collision detection, because he gets hit ridiculously easily. Still, I think it's worth checking out. You can finish it in about half an hour, and the early stages are pretty relaxed. At least if the arcade owner didn't crank the dip switch difficulty settings all the way up. Panic Park is a relatively late arcade release from 1998, and sometimes it ended up in places that felt more like family entertainment centers than dark, old-school arcades. The thing that makes Panic Park impossible to ignore is its unique sliding controllers that 1 or 2 players use during the game. These sliders are used across a variety of simple minigames, with both the minigame and its difficulty being selected randomly. Well, except for the Panic Park mode itself, which is designed to be more challenging. The minigames themselves are pretty simple most of the time. You collect coins, avoid falling off platforms, or dodge different kinds of traps. This is one of those games that's really hard to make look addictive through recorded gameplay alone, especially when players are physically shoving each other around with the sliders. And if you're not playing it on original hardware, it can also feel pretty frustrating. Still, if you ever run into one of these machines in the wild, or at one of the restored retro arcades that exist today, you absolutely need to grab a friend and go head to head. If you thought Panic Park was weird, then with Prop Cycle, Namco completely lost its mind. Just imagine a game where you're flying around on a bicycle attached to a hang glider above a massive canyon. And somehow, that's not even the weirdest part. To actually control the bike, you have to pedal using real physical pedals built into the arcade machine. You'd probably expect pedaling faster to make you fly higher, but here's the catch. To really gain altitude, you actually need to lean yourself backward. And to dive downward, you have to push yourself forward. Oh, and there's one more little detail that's just as ridiculous.
And one of the cool things about it too is that there's this big blower fan in the front of the cabinet that you're facing that's blowing air into your face to kind of simulate, you flying through the air, like feeling the wind against your face. It's so cool.
I honestly recommend watching Dinky Flix' full video just to fully understand how bizarre this machine really is. I first discovered iRobot after reading The Fantastic iRobot by Isaac Asimov. And then I quickly realized the game has absolutely nothing to do with the book. In fact, it's much closer to 1984. The mechanics and rules in iRobot are pretty strange, and the game really has to teach them to you during the first stage. Basically, your goal is to move from the outer edge of the stage toward the center, and destroy both the giant eye and the shield protecting it. To do that, you need to walk across the red tiles and turn them blue. But there's one small catch. You can't jump over gaps while the eye is open and watching you. You can also shoot the birds flying around the stages with your normal attacks, but that won't actually help you progress. It just gives you extra points. And of course, it's not just the eye trying to kill you. There are also other hazards. The game ended up being a commercial flop, and honestly, the fact that you basically have to survive the entire first stage just to understand how to properly play it probably didn't help. Even though the game was a commercial flop, it still holds an important place in arcade history. This was actually the first arcade game to use real-time 3D polygon graphics. Of course, there are no textures at all, as you can clearly see. Between stages, the game even uses this technology to create a very basic 3D shoot-'em-up sequence. And back then, that was extremely difficult to pull off. In 2025, the game received a sort of reboot developed by Jeff Minter, who's also known for equally bizarre games like Llamatron. The resolution is higher, the mazes are more detailed, but the core concept of the original game is still intact. And somehow, the reboot is also incredibly underrated. It only has around 36 Steam reviews, plus a handful of professional reviews on Metacritic. Most of them are actually pretty positive, so if you want a more accessible way to experience the game, it's definitely worth checking out. Liquid Kids basically takes the concept of Bubble Bobble and turns it into more of a side-scroller. Instead of trapping enemies inside bubbles and popping them, you attack them using water bombs, which, when you think about it, really isn't that different. The big difference is that in Bubble Bobble, you could jump on bubbles to reach higher areas and gain an advantage. Here, that simply doesn't work. You also can't create huge waterfalls flowing between platforms and floors the way you could in the Bubble Bobble series. That leaves the gameplay feeling a little more basic overall. Thankfully, the game makes up for it with fairly large stages and some genuinely beautiful graphics. Unfortunately, this is still an arcade game. Much like the New Zealand story, almost anything that touches you will kill you instantly. The game does save your approximate checkpoint position, not including boss fights, but you still have to sit through the annoying death animation and wait several seconds before continuing, even if you still have credits left. I'm playing the Hamster Corporation version here, which only includes very basic save states and no rewind feature. Over the years, the game received several ports and was also included in multiple emulation-based Taito collection. Still, none of them really did much to make the game feel more comfortable as a home experience, and that's kind of a shame. I hope you enjoyed the video. What obscure arcade games did you enjoy the most? Let me know in the comments.